what date?
January 26th.
January 26th. In order, the first order of business is the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag
of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
We'll approve the agenda. Lori, any changes?
We would like to remove the resilient communities discussion from the consent agenda and just talk about that briefly with myself.
That's element item A. Any other changes?
Can we pull the minutes of January 12th, 2015 for the council meeting?
That would be under the consent agenda.
That's under consent agenda.
Yeah,
Oh, sorry, we're adopting. I apologize.
not yet.
All right, next we'll adopt the agenda as amended. Make a motion, please.
I move that we adopt the amended agenda.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
We approve the amended agenda. No public announcements?
There are none.
We've adopted the agenda. Open forum. Anybody wish to address the council on items not on the agenda? Seeing none, we'll move to the consent agenda. We have a motion to approve the amended consent agenda. We've taken out the minutes of the January 12th meeting
Like that one, that's removed too.
and the letter of support to participate in the request for proposals for the 2015 Resilient Community Project.
I move we approve the amended consent agenda.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
We approve the amended consent agenda. Line sequentially, you're first with the minutes of the city council meeting.
Yes, there's a correction to note on the minutes. Let's see, it's on page 4 of the January 12th City Council meeting minutes. The second paragraph down, it states Councilmember Striegel questioned if the easement would eliminate the issues of resident homes having wet basements. It states Ms. Guerin stated that it would eliminate the issue, and actually it won't eliminate the issue. The issue is the yards and the flooding of the yards and the wetness of that, not the basements. So I wanted to make sure that was clear, that we did not agree that this would eliminate wet basements. The next one would be fifth paragraph down. It says Councilmember Bassett questioned if there are any other developments affected. I actually asked if there were any other developments that were using this practice within the city.
On what page is that on?
Page 4, and it is on page, sorry, I need to, 10 of the iPad agenda. And page 4 of the meetings.
So,
There it is. Is that enough? The changes that you
Those were the ones I had, yes, thank you.
want to make a motion
I've got one too.
to, oh, sorry.
Page 6, the last paragraph, Councilmembers Crowley and Striegel questioned if it would be more cost-effective to update the current meters with new technology. Ms. Hoffman stated she would get additional information and report back to council. Actually started off with questioning whether it would be more effective to update or not, and then we went into the fact we looked at it before and we know it's not, and what we requested was to have the city manager investigate how we would gather the data to report on this, not change the meters.
Lori, you got that? Anything else?
That's it.
I'll make a motion.
I move we approve the amended minutes.
I second that.
All in favor?
Aye.
Approve the amended minutes. Next we'll go to item A under the admin, the letter of support to participate in the request for proposals for the 2015 Resilient Communities Project.
Yes, and Mayor, I'm going to ask Jessica Bizey to give the main presentation. Since we don't have PowerPoint here tonight, you do have a copy of what Jessica will review with us tonight in front of you. And this is a project that you may remember we first applied for in conjunction with other communities and Carver County last year, so we had a similar presentation at that time from Holly Craft. But I thought it would be helpful if Jessica gave us an overview of what we're looking at, what we're committing to, and what the benefits would be if we participate.
Jessica?
Good evening, Mayor and Council. So I thought I'd start with just giving an overview of what the Resilient Communities Project is. It's a partnership between the University of Minnesota and a selected partner. So they partner for an entire academic year, and that is a partnership on a variety of different projects that the community identifies. And what the Resilient Communities Partnership does is it really brings different classes from all disciplines throughout the University of Minnesota and pairs them with the community to tackle an issue. It's a very competitive program. Multiple cities have gone in and done applications. In 2013, 14 applications were submitted for this program. And in 2014, 2 applications were submitted. It's a very competitive process to become the partner selected to work with the University of Minnesota. And the idea of the partnership is to really jumpstart any projects or ideas that the city has and move things forward. So really start thinking about how to tackle issues. So in 2014, Carver County did submit an application. The City of Victoria took part in, as part of the application process, the City Council had approved a letter of support. With that application, there are other agencies and other cities, the City of Chanhassen, the City of Chaska, the CDA, all took part in this, and we identified 22 projects that the county and the partners would bring forward. And Victoria identified 3 projects. For 2015 and 16, the group of partners has actually expanded a little bit to include the City of Watertown, and then additional departments within Carver County. They've identified 46 projects that they'd like to move forward with all these groups. The City of Victoria has identified 4. 3 of the projects we identified for this year are ones we had identified last year. And we're tonight here asking for a letter of support to move forward on this. The projects that the City of Victoria, or that staff identified, are a firefighter recruitment and retention and staffing model study. So we've talked a lot about getting firefighters and keeping firefighters and looking at, we want to know best practices, what was, and what we can do for staffing models, what might be a different way to look at staffing for our department. We're looking at a trail and wayfinding signage plan. This would help us identify areas where we could put signs, also identify the costs for putting signage throughout the community. Then we have an ecotourism marketing plan, which would really market our natural features. So we have, for the City of Lakes and Parks, and we have all these great features, and how are we going to market ourselves? We have some of these great things within the community. Both the wayfinding and the ecotourism plan would be things we'd want to partner with our surrounding communities on, because they would have overlapping benefits for us. And then lastly, we added this year a water conservation and education program to really start tackling the water conservation issues that we have and looking at how we can engage our residents. And also we thought it'd be a good idea, they can look at engineering and look at possible new ways to use systems. So the benefits to a project like this, it really allows the city to tackle large projects. There wouldn't be a lot of staff time required, just managing the students, making sure they have the information in order to deliver a product for us. There's limited cost participation. We get access to the University of Minnesota in its entirety So a lot of access, we get connections, hopefully to continue forward. We get new perspectives on different things. And then other projects that are being brought forward by other communities, we could take a look at and really bring those ideas into the city of Victoria. So the costs for the Resilient Communities Program, the county and its partners would be asked to participate in that. In 2014, they had requested $62,000 from the county and its partners. That was $2,000 from the city of Chanhassen, $5,000 from the city of Chaska. We had done up to $10,000 from the city of Victoria. Southwest Transit had done $10,000. We're finalizing the numbers for 2015, but after an evaluation, we're looking at having the city participate up to $5,000 for the 4 projects we identified. That being said, if projects would not be selected, we wouldn't have to put in a portion for that. We're looking at maybe doing up to $2,000 per project. So if 2 projects were put in, we could do $4,000 or a lesser amount. We were thinking that the $5,000 amount seemed to be appropriate for this. And we would budget that in 2016. So if you approve it, we just want to go ahead and put the money aside for 2016, and it wouldn't be payable until then. So the next steps in the process are to actually get our application in with the county. We'd find out in May if we were able to receive that, so we could start the budgeting process on that. And then in the summer is really when we begin to pare down our projects a little bit and match it with courses. It's typically you get matched with more than 1 course on a project, and then the classwork would begin, and we'd have students out to do a presentation on the final projects too. Any questions? I'd be happy to answer them. I worked on the Resilient Communities project in the city of North St. Paul before I came to Victoria here, so I'd be happy to answer any questions you have about the process.
Go back over the money one more time. The maximum we would be obligated for if we won 4 projects is
We discussed internally, and we're thinking $5,000.
$5,000. And then when the submittal in the year 2014, we budgeted.
We had set up to $10,000. That was if we were being selected. There's some negotiation room in once you get the projects kind of identified and know what's moving forward. So it was really just identifying that if we were selected, we could do an amount up to $10,000.
And if we were selected, we'd get a report. And one of the projects is the firefighter recruitment, retention, and staffing model. We'd have a report that is specific to Victoria.
It would be specific to the city of Victoria. So we would have students, Andrew and other, we could have students come out and meet with the fire department. We could bring the fire department to them, but really it would be specific to the city of Victoria. And
Is it all or nothing, or can they pick 1 or 2 of these projects?
One of the things with this program is sometimes it's hard to match a project to classes. So there is a potential that we wouldn't be able to find any matches. They try to look at a variety of different classes, from the Carlson School to any of the different colleges at the U. So
Does that change the donation amount?
yes, and so we set up to $5,000 if all of our projects were in, and we would do up to $2,000 per project. So if we have no projects that get moved forward, we would not hand for anything.
And I think there's also some reference to donation in kind of staff time. Is that still part of the proposal?
Yes, it would be still part of the proposal.
And then regarding the projects, has this proposal already been made in terms of what would be in there? I'm curious about what the big list looked like and that got narrowed down here.
Sure. These were the projects that staff had identified last year, and the big list includes projects from the city of Watertown is doing a business and retention program that they're looking at starting. There's a variety of projects from transportation to community development, program evaluation.
Specifically under the kind of water resources, I'm thinking about how we are every year talking about stormwater management and the spaghetti bowl of regulations we're trying to figure our way through, and wondering if that wouldn't have a lot of appeal
Sure.
in the selection. So
We
did
certainly,
that get considered, and if so, was there a reason?
I guess from my perspective, I prioritize the water conservation idea first because it's a need we really have, that we really probably don't have the capacity of staff to fully tackle it. And if we had people from a education perspective helping us prepare brochures and information that we could share, but also if we were able to tap into like the forestry classes with some expertise on topsoil and the other issues we're dealing with trying to teach people not to water as much. So I guess I myself prioritized that one over the other because it's in an immediate list of work we need to get done, and it would be helpful to have some additional support to get that all implemented.
Thank you.
Are the results of all of the studies that are done open for review by all the participants? Meaning that, could we see the results of City of Watertown's business development?
yes, and that's one of the things that I think, comparative to the other, typically they've partnered with one city for a variety of projects. This particular type of setup allows us to really take information from one another. So we will be able to have access to the reports of all of the other.
And it's kind of self-serving, but I'm assuming then that we would want to share what we find too.
Exactly. So we looked at it as doing it from a county perspective gives us that collaboration that we can hopefully, there'll be several projects that can have some overlapping benefits to the city.
Other questions? Comments? Somebody want to make a motion?
Sorry, let me ask one more question. Do you feel that the amount of our financial commitment reflects on our likelihood of being selected?
I can say from when I worked in North St. Paul, they had committed $40,000, and the city of Minneapolis had submitted $100,000, and the city of North St. Paul was selected. So it's really based on the projects as well as being able to tie it into the classes and make a meaningful project for the students as well.
The reason I ask is I think 5,000 is actually pretty modest, and there's some stuff that can have pretty good impact and pretty big value to the city here. And I guess, I don't know what the right number is or if there is a better number, but like I say, if it helps get it done, there's some important stuff here for
How about
us.
the county number?
The county number last year was 30,000,
And this year?
and they have not finalized their numbers yet.
It'll be in the range of,
It would be in the range of the 30 to
so we're part of a $30,000
40.
Plus ours.
plus ours.
Okay. Sure. Good.
Thanks.
Now we can make a motion.
Somebody like to make a motion?
I move we support a letter of support, we approve a letter of support to participate in request for proposals for 2015 Resilient Communities Project.
Second.
Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
We approve the letter. And with that, we're on the consent agenda. Information, public hearing, unfinished business. Lake Wasserman Ridge Second Edition Drainage Easement Agreement. Kara?
Hello. I have two quick comments. One, I feel like my chair is going to roll into you, but I can hear everyone perfectly. Fabulous.
That's true.
Okay, so this item was tabled at the last city council meeting. The council asked for some more information on the issue. And it ended up being kind of the primary reason why we ended up having this short meeting tonight. And the reason for that is the developer is actually scheduled to close on 2 of these lots next week. So they asked us to bring it forward to you so that you could make a decision either to approve it or not approve it. And either way, then they can move forward with implementing whatever they're gonna do and then close on the lots. So they wanted me to thank you for taking the time to consider this tonight, but ultimately it is a policy decision for the city to make. So specific to their specific case, and we talked about that in length last time, so I'm not gonna go through it, but just to summarize, the developer specifically requested that the city accept the drain tile as a public improvement. So it was designed and constructed to a city standard. And they're asking it to be in a public easement that would be maintained by the city. Their primary reason for that is that the HOA that they have in place for this development is structured such that all they're maintaining is the little monument by the entryway. And then they have some rules and some architectural standards. So they don't have, there isn't a lot of meat to their HOA documents. So they would need to go through and make some modifications if it would ultimately end up being HOA maintained. So they made the request to the city. That's what prompted the discussion we've been having at a staff level about this issue for the last couple of months, and resulted in it being back on the agenda so quickly tonight, because they really need a yes or a no from the city council so they can move forward with what they need to do. But as I stated, it's ultimately a policy decision for the city, and I think, and we've talked about it in somewhat vaguer terms than this, but essentially what it comes down to is, do we think that drain tile is public infrastructure that the city should maintain? Because specifically in this case, that's what we're talking about, is are these rear drain tile systems something that we want to be in the business of maintaining? The questions that were raised at the last city council meeting were all good ones, and I think you probably all got the sense of how we were feeling, kind of going back and forth with, okay, those are good questions that were raised. They're things that we've grappled with since I've been working at the city since 2001. We did take the last 2 weeks to regroup together and reconfirm whether we think that this is the right thing for the city to do, and Ann and I spent some time talking through the maintenance and what might be involved with that. Ben has some experience with this issue also from his past job, so we had an opportunity to get their historical perspective on it and chatted a bit with Lori some more. And even with all of that, and I understand I completely appreciate, as Ann does, not wanting to maintain anything more than we should be in the business of maintaining. We talk about that a lot with all of the outlots and all of the other things that we have to maintain, that we do want to try to not take on any more than we should. But in this particular case, we do think that it's in the residents' best interest for the city to maintain these systems. It's proving somewhat difficult as I tried to ponder how to kind of walk the council through the past historical experience we've had with this issue. Pretty much every neighborhood that's been built since 2001, 2002, so Watermark, Applewood, Greenway on the Park, every one of them up through Lake Town, I could point to a couple of specific instances with neighbors coming to the city after the fact, after they moved in, saying, my sump pump runs every 5 minutes, the rear yard behind my house is wet all the time, what are you gonna do about it? And we say, we're not gonna do anything about it, that's for you guys to figure out. Then they go back to their developer, and the developer and the homeowners argue for a while, and suddenly somebody gets to a solution of installing drain tile in the rear yards. When we grappled with it in the early to mid 2000s, we ended up putting a drain tile policy statement in place that says that they're private systems, so they have to install them, and they have to sign an agreement that says they'll maintain them. Generally, I've found homeowners to really not like that idea. They, just don't want to sign another agreement that gets recorded at their property. B, they think it's a city issue and that the city should deal with it. But even more problematically than that, when you start dealing with these things on a lot by lot basis when they're coming in, you can't really effectively solve the problem on a lot by lot basis. Because, you know, maybe the neighbors don't like each other. Maybe the neighbor's kid keeps running in their yard, so they don't want to be neighborly and solve the problem together. So you end up with these kind of piecemeal systems, all trying to get to our storm sewer system to get connected. So it just doesn't feel to me after, I mean, I've been dealing with it since 2001, it's 2015. I don't feel like that system that we had in place was working. So it seemed to me that trying this approach where it gets installed proactively to a city standard, that we had an opportunity to review how it was getting constructed, we had an opportunity to inspect the improvements when it was going in, made a lot of sense. So that's a very quick summary as to why staff came up with the recommendation that we made, but at the end of the day, it is a policy decision. So we're recommending you approve it, but certainly if you guys don't think that that's appropriate, then the developer understands that risk and he will move on and figure out how to deal with it privately and close on his lots and get on with selling houses.
I'm not sure I understood. As you finish up, you said you're recommending a proactive approach.
Yeah.
Is the HOA responsibility not proactive?
What I don't like about the HOA responsibility for maintaining it is I don't know how a group of homeowners is going to know how to maintain an infrastructure system of 2,600 feet of drain tile with cleanouts every 300 feet. The regular maintenance on it, and by regular, you know, we're talking years before the pipe is going to need any routine maintenance, but the line's going to need to be jetted. So is a group of homeowners going to know, okay, the system's not working, oh, we'll go jet it. Well, they'll probably call us and we'll probably walk them through what they need to do. And
My guess is they won't even know there's a system there.
That's true.
there is that. The other problem with the HOA maintained system is that when you call Go for One call because you're gonna dig, the city gets notified and the city comes out and locates sewer and water lines around the area. So if there's a rear storm sewer line, we have those all over the city. We have storm sewer pipes and catch basins in people's backyards everywhere. We go out and locate that. If this is an HOA maintained system, they don't get notified that somebody's going to be digging, so there is no way to have that line located. Now, I'd like to think that the homeowner knows where their own drain tile line is in their own yard. Maybe the first buyer does, but by the third or fourth buyer, they don't know it's there. Where if it's a city maintained facility and a locate calls come in, then the public works guys will flag it and note that it's back there so that it won't get damaged. It's less likely, I shouldn't say it won't get damaged, it's less likely to get damaged by somebody doing something in their yard.
I'm glad we tabled this, to think about it. If we go back to the discussion from 2 weeks ago, I really wasn't in favor of this. I said, why do we want to do this? But on reflection, and you know, my previous comment, I don't mean to imply that homeowners are ignorant by any means. It's just more of not a priority and you don't think about it. And given the experiences that you've described over the past 10 years of how we're involved anyway, it seems to me that it is in our best interest to be involved from a position of authority so that we can direct things rather than try to be a mediator to get things done most expeditiously. So I guess I am inclined to support your recommendation.
What is the likelihood that a major capital investment would have to take place in the future with respect to any of this? The useful life is 10 years, 20 years?
Oh, it's longer than that because it's a plastic pipe. So our sanitary sewer pipes last 50 years. So the bigger risk would be so what'll happen because this easement is here now, when a building permit gets pulled, it would appear on their survey, the drain tile would be marked on the survey. Typically when people do then go to look to do some additional things in their yard, Many of them will look at a survey, or they'll call the city and then we'll look at their survey. The bigger risk is gonna be if trees get planted too close. Now this one's 4 feet deep. At what point does it take the roots to grow into the line and start to back it up? But even then, we would probably, it's the diameter of a sanitary sewer line, so we can still jet it and clean it the same way we do when roots grow into the sanitary sewer line. So I don't anticipate it being any time in the near term where that whole system would need to be reconstructed. They haven't been around long enough. Cities are dealing with this all over who have clay soils. I'm not aware of systems that have been around long enough that I can really tell you what the useful life is, but
The terms of the easement would provide that if there were a significant investment involved, that total could be assessed back to the affected homeowners?
in accordance with state statute. So assuming state statute still allows us to assess back to homeowners. But our assessment policy today and state statute today would allow us to assess them back if we did a capital project.
And other than that, we're looking at $300 every year, every
No, not
5
every year,
years?
no. I can't, it's very difficult to determine what the time frame is. But like I said, we could see this going out 10 years, 15 years before we'd have to do anything.
For me, this is probably more philosophical than it is financial. You know, how much of this stuff over the next 10 years will we end up owning? And I understand if we direct the grading or we do the grading and we create the issue that we're obligated to resolve it, or if it's, you know, but when this is in backyards and it is strictly the developer found something that they didn't anticipate, we then are becoming kind of their risk insurer. And I just think it sets a bad precedent that anytime a developer finds something they didn't plan on, we bail them out. To me, it just feels wrong. And I think in terms of how it's handled, you know, again, I don't know that the people of the HOAs necessarily need to be experts or technicians on this, but I do think that, you know, it's more about information and communication. So, you know, what can we do to require that as the properties change hands, that the information is readily available for the seller and the buyer to make sure there's no misunderstanding. I just, also, I guess I worry about putting a public right of way, so it's now public property, so I have a 20-foot wide swath through my backyard that you own, or that you have access to. I guess I just shouldn't stay out of people's backyards. And so to me, it just, I was hoping for some new information tonight, or something that would change my mind, because I just look at this and I don't think that this is where the city should be spending its resources and a precedent we should set.
Lonnie, Bill?
Yeah, I 100% agree with Tom. I've worked a lot with drainage agreements and nothing good comes of them. And when I look at this agreement, there's still nothing in here that says anything about if somebody wants to add more tile into their system because their bathroom is extra wet. Do we allow them? How much do they pay? There's none of that spelled out in here, and so what's going to happen is the city is going to be in the middle of all of that, and then we're going to have to, you know, be the referee and say, yes, you can add more tile into this system, but you know, the other neighbors down the way, you're not allowed. There's so many things in here that are not spelled out that, you know, on a regular, to me, a standard drainage agreement, there's nothing. This doesn't resemble anything. This, again, to me, is something like what Tom said. This is just a bailout for the developer because now, you know, they found water. And I agree. If we approve this one, from now on, the developers are going to want to get rid of all of their issues, dump it on us, and then we'll, you know, sooner or later have to buy a jetter truck and, you know, spend 3 weeks out of the year jetting out backyard drain tiles. And
I
it's
guess
just not
what
a
I
good
want to clarify is this isn't a case of a developer screwing up. These are soils that exist in our city throughout.
Yeah.
So this is an issue that our homeowners grapple with in every neighborhood. They've elected to try to be proactive for their residents so that they have better properties.
Well, actually,
So
they-
the debate is who's maintaining it. So they've made the request for the public to maintain it.
they're not doing this out of the goodness of their hearts. They're doing this because the backyards are wet, and if they didn't get the water out of there, they wouldn't sell the lots. That's why.
I do think that, there's a potential role somewhere in in the future if things become completely untenable. But I would much rather ride in on the white horse when the appropriate parties who own the property and have a stake in it have exhausted all their efforts to remediate it. And we can, whether we act as a consultant or mediator, whatever, but I would rather do that on an exception basis rather than as our standard policy. I do think that this is a great example of a developer being responsible in terms of putting in the drain tile ahead of time and trying to make the properties the best they can be. But again, that's for them to make it more marketable. I think our role then is to, we've still got responsibility for the pond at the end of this line that we'll have to maintain and make sure it's appropriate for the drainage. So we do have a role here. I just don't know that going through people's backyards is it.
All right,
I have concerns about the future. So part of me is in agreement with Mr. Crowley in that I'd rather see us be proactive as well and deal with it now. Because I can see this play out in 10, 20 years or whatever that may be by the time there's an issue. And they'll come back to the city. You had an opportunity to take care of this then. You did not. Here's, what are you going to do about it? Because ultimately it's in the city of Victoria. From the perspective of maintenance, if I understand correctly, we're talking, again, I know this is an estimate, Ann, but $300 and maybe 10 at the least, 20 at the most, maybe 30, depending on what occurs, and that's $300. And it's very minimal. I'm wondering, is there a compromise in the situation as we move forward in terms of saying, HOA, community, you are responsible, but the city will, you can come to the city first in terms of jetting it out and doing the maintenance when it's time. And again, I think I also worry about if we're not involved, how do you know it's there? Because quite frankly, it's leading me to go, I wonder if I have that. I should have that if I don't have that, because my backyard gets really wet in a particular area. And what are we eventually going to do about that? But I also know, having bought a house prior to this that was 3 owners out, there were a number of things in that house I was not aware of until we sold the house. So once again, I'm kind of back to what Mr. Crowley was saying earlier is, how do you know what's there and don't know? So I don't know if there is a compromise in the situation that allows us to be the group that would maintain it for the HOA, but the HOA and that community own it. I don't know if that's even a feasible situation. Just because we would have the equipment, we would have the capability and the knowledge to, again, maintain it. So I don't know if that's even an option.
And you might want to speak to the attorney on this, but you will now run into it where it doesn't belong to the city, and we are maintaining private property.
Got it.
That's my biggest
And
concern.
I would be
is-
concerned, and right now we contract that out, so, I mean, it's, at least today. So,
Right.
we're not going out to do that work now, but I would, be a little reluctant of taking city equipment on private property that we have no rights to be
Rights
on
to.
easement unless there's some
Got it.
kind of an agreement that's made.
And to me, that's the perfect situation. It's private property, we have nothing to do with it, and we're done.
But that's the issue is, I've witnessed it in our neighborhood where this exact issue came up, and the only way to get it resolved was for the city to get involved. And so that's where I go back, is that it doesn't matter whether we have an easement or not, we will be
It
involved.
won't be involved.
And as a result, if we're going to be involved, we better be in a... It's best for the city, it's best for the people that fund the city to be in a position of authority so they can direct it in a manner that best suits the city. And so I'm all for, I never want to put more laws on the books and restrict, we should be reducing government. But in this instance, having seen these things occur, this is actually where government can help. And that's why we exist. And we can bring a better solution, I
And then-
believe, in this role.
And then I would look to the attorney, because when I look at this agreement here, there's so many questions and unknowns that I guess I'd feel uncomfortable with the city entering into this agreement with no real specifics on what happens, who does what, who pays for what, how it gets portioned out, nothing.
Well, I mean, your point is well taken. I mean, the easement is a very bare bones easement. The language that's been put in there is really a recitation of our existing authority to assess if capital improvement is required at some point in the future. It doesn't address any of the issues that you're pointing to. These are issues that perhaps could be put into a different document if one existed. But at this point, the discussions that those issues have not been addressed in anything that's being entered into between the city and the developer.
So in those instances, or in that instance, I think there are actually two different things to address. There's the general policy, and then there's the legal agreement to implement the policy. And not being an attorney and not being an expert in easements, I can't tell you whether it's appropriate or not. I'm in favor of the policy, but to support the policy, we better have a rock-solid agreement to go with it.
Well, and I guess what is proposed here is consistent with all of the drainage and utility easements that exist around the city. So what would happen in the cases that you described, if the homeowners decided to request to add on to the system, they would be required to get a permit from us through our existing right-of-way and utility easement process that exists. So I get these requests all the time to tie into our storm sewer system. And so we have them submit a drawing showing us what we want to do, and then we evaluate whether it's appropriate or not. An 8-inch line is perfectly capable if they all wanted to run drain tile lines in between all of their homes. I'm not worried about it having capacity for them to tie into. We'd be most concerned with how they make that connection, so we would require them to make the connection in a particular manner, and then we would inspect the connection to make sure that they aren't damaging the integrity of the pipe. This easement would give us the authority to be able to do that. Otherwise, if it's just them all fighting amongst themselves trying to decide if they can tie up to it, they'll call me and tell me I need to tell them what to do on it, but I will just say your system's private and you guys gotta work it out. Here's what I think you should do, but so on and so forth. So because of the fact that we have all those other processes in place, I view this as pretty similar to the other drainage and utility easements that we have in all the backyards of everybody who has, all of you who live in the houses that have lots that drain to the middle between you, has a drainage and utility easement in the back of it that I spend a lot of time responding to phone calls on and walking and reviewing requests to tie into storm sewer systems and drain tiles, so.
Just out of curiosity, so if you were jetting it, how close do you have to get to the cleanouts to actually be, I mean, would the truck have to drive through the backyards to reach the cleanouts to actually perform the work?
I can't remember how long of a run you can jet.
Generally, we run about 300 feet,
And this
up
is
to
20
5
so
sometimes.
This is 2,600 feet.
Yeah, so we'd need access to several locations.
I mean, that's kind of one of the things that, I'm still not in favor of this, but just thinking about it, I don't think it's just $300. I think there's gonna end up being some landscaping restoration that has to happen if you take a big heavy truck through people's backyards.
We have, in some cases, especially up north, we've got areas where we have sewer, that same kind of thing that we have to run through people's backyards to clean the sewers as well, so.
I think I understand when it's a sanitary sewer that is a community resource. This is to dry up private backyards. It's different in my mind. And so in the interest of doing the best thing for our residents, I would be more in favor of developing a policy or some kind of an ordinance that is part of our, you know, whether it's PUD or whatever, something that holds the developers accountable and is part of our checkoff when we're approving developments, is to, you know, understand and ensure that they manage groundwater, excessive groundwater conditions, rather than just saying we'll be the catch-all for anything that goes wrong.
Well, the same question will still need to be answered. If I haven't gone there yet, but there is a part of me that envisions a future where I am saying to you, I'm gonna recommend we proactively drain tile every one of these back-to-back rear yard drainage swales. And what I picture is doing like a filtration kind of trench system where we're getting some water quality benefit out of it, because we spend so much time dealing with these complaints, that even if and I'm not quite ready to go there to start mandating that design element for the developers, but if I were to do that, then we still need to answer the question then, so does the policy end up being, yes, we think these need to be put in, and yes, we want your HOA to maintain them, so you need to create an HOA, because not every development has an HOA. That's a choice that we allow the developers to make. We don't tell them they have to have one. But we certainly could say, we want these systems going in, we want you to maintain them, we want you to address them in your HOA documents, we'll be a resource to you. You know, and figure out in the HOA documents and the development agreement how we would then be able to charge them back. I'm kind of talking off the top of my head, but that,
Well, there's work to be done in the future, I think, clearly.
yeah,
Let me just make sure I understand the economics of this. It's not only about the money, but the cost to install the drain tile is the developer and the resident homeowner's cost, true?
correct. So the developer's installing it, the cost of the installation gets put onto the price of the lots.
So we're talking about a relatively insignificant amount of, an insignificant amount of money over a lengthy period of time that the city would be obligated for. But in the back end of that, we're anticipating getting involved and helping issues as they arise, should they arise. It's easier for us, in your opinion, it's easier for us to manage the issues the things that could go wrong if there's an easement and we have the right to go on and make the fix, as opposed to homeowners potentially even negotiating amongst themselves.
Yeah.
Any other comments? Somebody want to make a motion?
One more comment, please. Lori, on the legal side, we talked previously about a process to have all legal documents approved and reviewed, and we're still not there yet. And I guess what I would hope to see going forward on all future legal documents is that, number one, there's a stamp on it that the attorneys approve this, and then number two, a list of risks and points that we need to consider. Because in subject areas like this, it's really hard to look at it and say, okay, we missed this or this or that. So having that expert review, a list of risk points, and understanding that the attorney has reviewed it and is approving, as well as staff, is really important. So thank you.
Bob did review this? Do you know?
Bob did review the drainage easement. The track changes are his.
Well, then
That was
I guess
his
to Jim's
proposed
point,
edit.
we should initial it and at least indicate that, because I know Jim's been a proponent of that,
Okay.
I think rightly so, for a while.
So do we have anything in this document that says then, or that the new owners of these properties will know they can't plant anything on it? I mean, there's nothing in here that tells them.
I didn't want to go so far as to tell them to restrict them from necessarily planting on it.
I look at it that, one of the concerns that Councilmember Striegel voiced was not wanting to put easements in everybody's backyard. And I'm trying to think of a house in my neighborhood that does not have such an easement. We've all got them. And I believe there is a statement that I had to sign, something that I had to sign, that I will not do anything in that. In fact, I can't even go in and cut a tree down in that easement right now. And that's restricted as a part of my purchase agreement. So what are we missing?
Typically, when we draft similar types of easements very frequently, and we do have provisions that we would put in there that say, that you know, what can and cannot be put in the easement area. And if there are specific things, such as improvements that we don't want built, we'll put that in the easement. And that's, those are things that can and often are addressed in easement agreements. This one, the initial draft of this was not drafted by my office. It was drafted by the property owner. I'm sorry, drafted by the developer's attorney.
Do we want to look at that, Kara, Ann?
Yeah, I was looking at Ann to see, do we wanna?
And I guess I would like to take some time to look at that, as far as what can and can't be in.
I struggle with how much, I don't wanna overly restrict their use of their backyard either with, you know, you can't do this in here, you can't do that in there, you can't do this in here. In the case you're referencing, it's a wetland buffer, so we're very specific of what they can and can't do back there.
One thing that is nice to have in these easement agreements is the explicit authority to go in and remove things if we need to go in and maintain. So if somebody starts putting in gardens in there, and then we have to get in there and we have to do a, you know, emergency maintenance for some reason, we don't want to get crosswise with the property owner who says, you can't do that. I don't know, so it does give, at least it gives you something. And will they actually remember that at the time you're pulling out their garden? Probably not, but at least it does put them on notice. There's something in the record that says that we do have the authority to.
At the risk of tabling this again, I'm in favor of the policy, but I don't think we have the legal agreement ready to go yet.
We could craft a motion, though, that is approving the policy, subject to continued work between the parties on the specific language of the agreement.
We're only approving this agreement, we're not approving any policy.
Did I say policy?
Well, but you de
We're
facto
setting,
are.
we're
Yeah.
setting a precedent, and
Right.
my concern is it doesn't sound like the legal agreement supports what we're willing to support.
Beyond that, though, I heard a couple comments just in the last couple minutes about how we all have easements, and it would lead you to believe that this isn't a precedent. So why are we talking about it? If it's so common and every single person has an easement in their backyard, why is this one different that it came in front of council?
It's the drain tile as public infrastructure is what's different. You don't all have drain tiles in your easements. The easements exist, but I'm proposing that the public maintain drain tile in an easement. So that's the change.
Because that easement does exist in my backyard, you could decide to come in and put a drain tile in and assess me for it.
Yes. Ann, sorry, can I just ask Ann a quick question? Outside of trees in the easement, I just don't know that I would want to tell them trees and, I mean, they can't put a structure in the easement.
Fence
so.
posts.
Should.
We aren't proposing to dig up the pipe though.
Right.
You know, if we, then you're in the capital. If we're having to dig up and excavate a pipe, we'll probably need, we're doing a project at that point, and then we're doing a 429 process with a public hearing and neighborhood meetings, and we're working with the homeowners. We probably need some temporary easements if we're gonna dig the line up. But as a matter of access for routine maintenance,
No,
if they wanna put a swing set over it, I don't care. I
Yeah.
don't, you know,
We just
I don't
need-
wanna overly restrict their use of their yard.
we just need to be able to pull the hose and get to a clean out.
And they put a ton of them in so that we
Yeah.
would have multiple points in order to access it.
You
So-
hope if there's a plug, it's not the whole, it's gonna be something, you know,
Localized.
between two clean outs that, you know, you're in, you're out.
So one more time, if we don't approve this tonight, what happens?
The developer will have to go back and figure out how to deal with it privately.
Let me rephrase Jim's question. If we don't approve, if we approve the concept of going forward with an easement, the specific language of the easement agreement yet to be discussed, then what happens?
Well, they need it approved before they close on the lots. So we need to sign the easement document before they close on the lots, or we're suddenly negotiating easements with property owners instead of with the developer. And the developer doesn't wanna
Let me ask you.
put his buyer in that
This
situation.
easement is, did I hear you say this easement is in the form of every easement that we've done, in every development since 2001?
No, not necessarily, but the language isn't,
Much different.
it, we have other easements that are more restrictive, like our sanitary sewer easements have a lot of language in them about what can happen, the ones we got through the Traxler area. But this easement language isn't inconsistent with typical easement language. We just aren't being any more restrictive in it, because I wasn't feeling overly inclined to restrict their reasonable use of their property.
But you don't feel that compulsion with the sanitary sewer easement?
That we need to be a little bit more protective of, with what happens above it.
So your recommendation is stated in the staff report is to approve this easement?
I'm just checking with Ann to see whether she would like to see us add something about trees.
Based on what I know we can and can't do within the easements, I don't see a need for it.
What happens, Ann, if somebody plants a tree and breaks the line? And I know that putting the language in the easement isn't gonna cause that to not happen,
Yeah.
but if it's not in there right now, what happens?
Generally, where we have easements, we don't have that issue.
Well, we have the sanitary easements all over the place, and there are trees planted all around them.
So, let me rephrase the question. Remove the tree. What happens if they do something to break that line?
Thereafter,
Usually,
the city expressly reserves all rights to specially assessed costs incurred in relation to such drainage lines or tiles to the full extent of permitted by law. That's what the.
so if it was,
So we
if
would
it
have the
was,
authority to do that.
yes.
I'm gonna make a motion that we approve the drainage easement agreement as specified in the staff report, whatever the number is. 15-11. Is there a second?
Second.
Any further discussion?
Is there, I don't know if this is the right time really, to note this, but I think there is an opportunity for us to sort of, again, continue to come back to this and look at this, because once we have one developer, we have potentially others lining up, and we know our soils are such that it will be an issue. So I would like to recommend or amend that there is further work done to solidify policy, contract, et cetera, on potential future issues such as this.
Yeah, I fully expect that we'll be continuing to talk about this as we move forward. It is a case by case. When you talk about precedents, the precedents that we have allowed drain tile as public infrastructure means that if somebody requests that of me, I will say, yes, we've allowed that in the past, but based on this discussion here, I think it would make sense that I make sure to bring that issue forward, so if it comes through in another plat, I can be sure to highlight it in our staff report and have it be a discussion item, so we continue to vet through what makes sense and what doesn't.
My suspicions are that this topic will come up in another tangent, I guess, or tangential discussion as it relates to stormwater management, once those rules become more solidified.
I have another question, Mr. Mayor.
Sure.
Will the planning commission have any role in looking at this issue? Or?
This would be my intent as we present projects and go through that process, so that's part of the discussion. And I don't know if
Commissioner Motion?
Jeff being here, if he has anything he wants to add specifically to that.
Advice?
Well, I think there, based on discussion, there's a number of questions that I've intended to take back to the planning commission, which is, given the conditions that in this case experienced and perhaps we might experience in the future, are there things that we can do to anticipate it, to head it off, to engage in a dialogue with the developer at that time? based on past experience, and I think Kara can also offer input on that dialogue when we review it as a planning commission.
Any other discussion? We have a motion on the floor with a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
No.
No,
Two, the motion carries 3-2. Moving along, we have no new business, reports of the city manager.
Yes, I'm going to pass out copies of an invitation from the Minnehaha Creek Watershed District. This notice will be included in the February 9th correspondence packet, but as a matter of calendar, I wanted to get it in front of you as we received it today. They are holding a kickoff meeting as they embark on updating their comprehensive water resources management plan. And those kickoff meetings, there'll be 2 opportunities for input. Staff will certainly attend. They've asked me to specifically invite our elected officials and any residents that would be interested in attending. So that kickoff meeting, those kickoff meetings will be held on Wednesday, February 18th. The 2 times are 1 to 2 p.m. or 6 to 7 p.m. at the Minnetonka Community Center. And they're asking for an RSVP to Becky Christopher. So again, all these details will be included in the correspondence package, but I did bring copies for you tonight so you can have ample time to prepare if you'd like to attend. And the next item, I wanted to thank everyone that attended the focus group that the city hosted last Thursday evening. There were 24 people that gathered from between 5:30 and 6 till about 9 o'clock to begin to consider what are the projects, initiatives, strengths, positive changes over the last 5 to 10 years that residents have seen. So there were 3 staff, 2 consultants, and the remainder were residents and business owners. We had a group that really ranged from a woman who had moved in a month ago, transferred from out of state, new to the community, new to the state, to a gentleman in his 50s that was born and raised here, and sort of all over in between. Just a fabulous discussion. It was a great group. We did, at the end, talk about reflections, and the common theme was that people were very pleased with the process and with the positive energy that they felt from their fellow participants. We're going to talk a lot more about the specific items that were discussed and the themes that we heard from this group when we get together on Saturday, January 31st, in our strategic planning session. And that is going to be from 9 a.m. to 3:30 p.m. It will be held at the new City Hall in the council chambers. The meeting is open to the public. The setup is so that council and staff will be participating in that exercise and be facilitated by Richard and Marina Fersman. It's not designed as an opportunity for the public to participate at that point, but they're definitely welcome to be there and to be observing the process and the discussion.
You want to comment on the survey?
Sure. The survey, it'll be February 9th when we see each other again. The postcards will be mailed shortly thereafter, letting the 1,200 residents that are selected to participate in the citizen survey know that they've been selected. About a week after that, they get their first mailing, and about 2 weeks after that, they get their second opportunity if they've pitched it or they've forgotten about it. Just a little reminder that they are one of those 1,200 households that's been selected.
is that about 50% of our households in the city? Is that
Ben,
how that
is that
number
about right?
works out?
Right.
Just under.
Is that how that number was picked?
No, 1,200 is a constant number, irregardless of the size of your community. Some larger communities pay an increased fee to do a larger sample size, but otherwise that 1,200 is common across the approximately 500 jurisdictions that participate.
And one more, ULI?
Yes, and so we get the survey results on May 4th, and then, or we'll have a presentation May 11th at our city council meeting. And then the following Monday, which is an off-council night, May 18th, the city council, the planning commission, and staff will gather for the ULI Urban Land Institute Navigating Our Competitive Future workshop. And that also will be open to the public and anyone that would want to attend and listen in.
So by the 1st of June, we should have a pretty good, where are we at the 1st of June in terms of direction for the rest of the year and the foreseeable future?
Sure. By the 1st of June, we'll have heard from this group of citizens from the focus group, a group that elected to participate in an in-depth exercise. we'll have the information on the questions that we designed specifically, as well as quality of life and service indicators that we get from the citizen survey. We'll have the feedback that we get through the ULI process from that panel of people that includes real estate professionals, planning professionals. So we'll have a really robust, well-rounded view of what our current reality is, what our future projections look like, and what I suspect, just based on what happened on the focus group, we'll identify that a lot of the things that have been on our minds as council and staff are also common themes for all of these other groups.
Good. Anything else to report?
That's it for this evening.
What was the date of the focus group again, or the,
31st.
no, May 18th?
Oh.
Sorry?
Yes, Monday, May 18th.
Thank you.
And I did send out a calendar note to the city council and the planning commission probably about 2 weeks ago to make sure, to give everyone as much opportunity as possible to plan around that, since I know it is an off-council night.
February 9th is a pretty significant date too. Why don't you just, I was gonna, but you should talk about
Okay, I wasn't sure. February 9th, we'll be doing our ribbon cutting at City Hall. We are going to gather at 5:30 in the main lobby of City Hall. We are currently hopeful that a group of Boy Scouts will join us to do a flag raising ceremony. And then we'll have an opportunity for remarks from the mayor and council. A tour of City Hall, if there's anyone there that has not been able to take a tour at that point, and an official ribbon cutting. The ribbon cutting will happen up in the council chambers, and the idea is that that's something that we'll be able to film and broadcast for people that can't join us at 5:30 on a Monday night.
it. And to be followed by the first city council meeting in the next 100 years of the city of Victoria in the new city hall.
Absolutely.
God, that sounds good. I have nothing. Any council members have any report?
I just have one
Joe?
question. How close, is this this building here, are we 100% done? Are we, how close are we to being done paying bills and just being 100%, this is ours?
Councilmember Pavelko, we are fairly close to the end. So we're doing a few odds and ends with some storage and miscellaneous things that are popping up that.
The fuel card readers.
Yeah,
we're
fuel
looking
card
at.
reader. So there's just kind of some little things that are stragglers out that, we wanted to get in and get up and running and see what, as far as operations go. But we're getting real close.
And we still have retainage with the contractors. I didn't get a chance to ask Stahl at what point they'll be recommending final payment. I'm sure they have, if it's like my projects, there's final paperwork we go through with them before we recommend final payment. So I don't know how far out that might be yet.
Well, it looks nice.
You want to comment on the city hall, because we're in about the same condition in the city hall.
It's wonderful. It was so fun to come to work this morning. So the library, we got our occupancy last week. Library got temporary occupancy on Friday, so they're now starting to move in shelving. Their move-in time is going to take a lot longer than ours did because they have shelving, they have their circulation desk to assemble, they have all the books to bring in. But the contractors are still, certain sets of them are on site regularly, still finishing up stuff. So we still have the big logo needs to go out front. I think that's happening yet this month. Window treatments have to go in yet.
The logo and sunshades are not in until the end of February.
End of February.
There was a back order issue.
So loose ends, we've got some additional tables we are going to order. There were some things that we held off on because we wanted to see where we ended up. If we ran into some extra costs that we weren't anticipating, we decided to wait on purchasing some things until we had a better picture of what was left. So we're working through that list now, some additional cabinetry.
By the 9th, the audiovisual system will be fully functional.
Yep.
It's hard to keep from smiling.
We feel the same.
Any reports from council members? Mr. Attorney, you, or Tom, did you have something?
No report.
No report.
When you wanna make a motion, we'll adjourn.
Move to adjourn.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
We are adjourned.